هر کلامی که از دهان هیتلر بیرون می آید دروغ است. وقتی می گوید صلح منظورش جنگ است و وقتی کفرگویانه از نام خداوند متعال استفاده می کند منظورش قدرت شر، فرشته رانده شده، شیطان است.
The White Rose was a student resistance movement. It began at the University of Munich with a small group of students in the summer of 1942, led by Hans Scholl and some of his friends. He was a medical student at the University of Munich. And he and his siblings had been raised in a family where their parents quietly opposed the Nazis. They exposed their children to works by Jewish German artists and writers. They had a very open and loving household, and they were also deeply religious. They were devout Protestants and sought a lot of comfort in their faith, and looked to their faith as a moral compass. So you had a group of young people who were very idealistic, who were very strong in their moral convictions and believed that what the Nazis were doing was wrong, in terms of the war and in terms of once they learned about the murder of Jews.
مردم آلمان، آیا می‌خواهید همان سرنوشتی را داشته باشید که یهودیان دارند؟ می‌خواهید با همان موازین رهبران فاسد خود مورد قضاوت قرار بگیرید؟ آیا ما قرار است تا ابد ملتی باشیم مورد تنفر تمام نوع بشر؟ نه، راه خود را از اوباشگری نازی‌ها جدا کنید. با عمل ثابت کنید که اینطور فکر نمی کنید. جنگ آزادی بخش جدیدی در راه است.
And so this resistance organization started writing leaflets and distributing them, putting them in the mail and sending them to cities all around Germany, distributing them on the streets in Munich secretly. They, of course, could not expose who they were. They could not let anybody know. They could not be caught distributing any of these leaflets, and they could not give any sort of evidence because, of course, the Gestapo started a manhunt almost immediately to find out who was creating these leaflets. So it was a student-run organization that lasted about 8 months before the leaders of the movement were caught and arrested.
از زمان فتح لهستان 300,000 یهودی در این کشور به حیوانی ترین شیوه به قتل رسیدند. مردم آلمان در خواب ابلهانه و ملال‌آوری فرو رفتند و مجرمان فاشیست را تشویق می کنند. همه می خواهند از گناه تبرئه شوند و هر کس به نوبه خود با آرامش و آسوده ترین وجدانها به پیش می رود. اما تبرئه آنها ممکن نیست. گناهکارند، گناهکارند، گناهکارند.
The White Rose Resistance Group ultimately distributed 6 leaflets, and later they were also painting slogans like the word freedom on the walls of the city of Munich. So people would encounter them if they walked by one of those walls, if they received one of those leaflets. But you don't see a massive protest movement spring up as a result of it, in part because I think people were probably too scared, or maybe they disagreed with what the leaflet was saying. It was still incredibly dangerous even to hold one of these leaflets, even to have it in your possession could be considered an act of treason. And so most people were very, very afraid of that.
آیا حقیقت ندارد که تمام آلمانی‌های صادق این روزها از دولتشان شرم دارند؟ در میان ما کیست که از ابعاد شرمی با خبر باشد که وقتی حجاب از چشمانمان بیفتد و دهشتناکترین جنایاتی که خارج از هر سنجه انسانی‌اند نمایان شوند، سراغ ما و کودکانمان خواهد آمد.
Hans Scholl and several of his friends actually went to the Soviet Union and also witnessed people in the Warsaw Ghetto on their way to the Soviet Union. And so they saw for themselves what the Germans were doing. They didn't understand the scope of the Holocaust, but they understood that Jews were being murdered en masse, and they tried to tell their fellow Germans about this. Again, we don't know if other Germans believed this information or didn't want to believe this information or thought it was just a rumor, but they did write it in one of the leaflets, and as you can imagine, that made the manhunt for who they were even stronger.
نام آلمان تا همیشه بی عزت می شود مگر آنکه جوانان آلمان به پا خیزند، انتقام بگیرند، کفاره بدهند، زجر دهندگان خود را در هم بکوبند و اروپای نوینی مملو از معنویت به پا کنند.
In February 1943, Hans Scholl and his younger sister Sophie, who were both members of the inner core of the White Rose movement, had a their sixth leaflet. They had sent a number of them through the mail. About 1,000 leaflets went out through the mail, and they had about 1,000 left over and decided to distribute them in their university at the University of Munich. So in the early morning, as students were in class and as they assumed nobody would be in the main building, they went into the building and they put piles of leaflets outside the doors of the classrooms so that when students came out, they would find the leaflets and begin to read them. Unfortunately, there was a custodian who was a member of the Nazi Party who discovered Hans and Sophie distributing the leaflets. He cornered them. All of the students came out of class. The Gestapo arrived very soon thereafter, and Hans and Sophie were arrested. They were separated. They were interrogated for hours and hours and hours. Very quickly, the Gestapo also picked up one of their collaborators, a man named Christoph Probst, who had handwritten a 7th leaflet, which they found on Hans, and they were able to trace the handwriting and discover and arrest Christoph. So within a week, the three were put on trial, and within hours of the end of their trial, they were executed by guillotine. They were beheaded. Over the next few months, more people were arrested. A number of them were executed and others served prison sentences.
امروز یک روز آفتابی بسیار عالی است و من باید بروم. اما در چنین روزهایی چند نفر باید در میدانهای جنگ جان ببازند؟ چند جوان امیدوار به آینده؟ مرگ من چه اهمیتی دارد اگر باعث آگاهی و بیداری هزاران نفر بشود؟ قطعاً بدنه دانشجویی به زودی شورش خواهد کرد.
As far as I know, this is one of the largest protests within Germany. The German people had had years in which, example after example was set for them about what happened when people resisted. And so it makes what the White Rose did all that more important, because it showed that this was something that was possible. But like the White Rose, every example within Germany of this kind of mass resistance was also met with overwhelming and brutal force against those who were trying to resist.